jazz festival here went through a whole bunch of weirdness and lost money and went belly up and all that stuff. Because Edmonton already has a well-established festival, Calgary would have been a really bad strategic place to lose on that Western Canada, the whole West Can circuit they used to call it. Right?
Sorry, I'm just going to stop you. I think we're 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Welcome back, everybody, to Unsung. And my next guest, because we are back up and live to tape anyway, is Mr. Pat Belliveau. Hey.
Hey.
We were just talking about a gig that Pat was doing, and I'll just let you continue.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's well, you brought it up, and it's a bit of a weird one. And while the situation that happened was a bit weird, and I don't remember. This would have been in the '90s, I think it was. And I was called by a fellow by the name of Mark Vasey, who I know some of the guys, a lot of the guys in town would remember Mark. He used to be the artistic director of Jazz City in Edmonton. And when the Calgary Festival went through a whole bunch of financial issues and blah, 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 Mark kind of stepped in to save the Calgary destination, because the whole West Can circuit, to be doing Winnipeg, Saskatoon, Edmonton, Vancouver, Victoria, and not have Calgary was not, logistically they didn't like that. So they stepped in to take over. So
was this after the Jazz Fest tanked?
Yes.
Okay.
So the Edmonton, to keep the West Can circuit together, Mark stepped in and kind of became the artistic director for the Calgary portion of things. So he called me up and said, I want you to do a 45-minute opening set for guitarist John Pizzarelli.
It's a great game.
Absolutely. Yeah. At the Glenbow Museum Theatre. I said, please, I would be happy to. So he said, just put a quartet together. I said, great, okay. So I hired my guys, and the gig came around, and I brought my mom down, because she's my biggest fan. Well, my wife might debate, but they're both my biggest fans. But anyway, God bless them both. So I'm in the green room with the guys going through our chart order and what we're playing and all that stuff.
Sure.
So there's a guy comes up to the ticket booth and says, I'm here to pick up my tickets for the Pizzarelli concert.
So he had prepaid?
I guess so. Or he prepaid and picked them up at the box office.
Yeah.
So he walks up and asks for his tickets, and he just happens to ask, so who's opening for him tonight? And they said it was me in a quartet. And the guy goes, really? I could see him at a club for $5 or $10 anytime I wanted to, which is kind of BS, but I mean, once in a while you can, sure. And he demanded his money back. So he got his money back and he split. And I didn't know that until after the gig was done, because my mom was in earshot of this guy at the ticket booth. So I had no idea that happened. And when I heard that, I'm like, okay, that's whacked, because I thought you would have come to hear Pizzarelli, because he's the headliner. Hello?
Well, that's, that you were making that point.
Well, yeah, it's like, stay in the lobby then until I'm done, and then go in, or whatever.
It's still the same money, really.
Exactly.
You're paying to see Pizzarelli.
Yeah, exactly. So
but,
I thought,
not that he shouldn't pay good money to see you either.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I appreciate that.
No,
but when I heard that, and I started thinking about it, I went, okay, I don't get that, because of the fact that you're now throwing the baby out with the bathwater, really. And I just kind of went, nah. If that's the way you're going to be, I'm glad you didn't stay for my gig. Screw you. Right. Sorry, but that's the way I felt. Yeah. So fine. I mean, don't have to be a dick about it. You just, do you edit that out, or can I keep that in?
No, you can. Are you kidding? You can say.
I don't know if I should. Yeah, sorry. That's my French side coming out. You see the hands moving and stuff.
The whole George Carlin thing. From the '70s.
Yeah, nothing. The words you can't say on television.
Yeah, you can say them all.
Oh, jeez. Okay. No, I better not. Sure. If my mom's going to watch this, I better not.
Right. Yeah.
But
Sorry, Mom.
She's heard me do a few, especially when I'm driving in this town. But that's a different story.
Right.
But anyway, yeah.
That is a crazy story.
It is
because once again, he can maybe see you for free or for little, but he can't see Pizzarelli for nothing.
No.
So
I stayed. The guys in the band and my band stayed for the Pizzarelli set, and it was fantastic. I'm like, good. I'm glad you missed this, you dick.
Yeah.
So there, I said it again. Okay.
All right.
But anyway,
quite a story.
Yeah.
So
a weird one, but anyway.
Yeah.
We all have them. We all have the weird ones. Yes, that's one of them for me. It's not the only one I have.
Yeah. You got another weird one off the top of your head?
There's always weird ones.
Yeah?
Always weird ones, yes.
Give me another weird one, if you can think of a...
I guess it depends on the degree of weird. Oh, by the way, product placement, Ambrose University.
That's right. Yeah. Shout out to Stefano Valdo. Hey, Steph.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, well, as we go along, I'll share some.
Okay.
So ask me whatever you'd
Sure,
like,
well,
and I'll. If there's a story to throw in, you can bet I'm going to put it in there.
I'm
Absolutely.
curious because I've asked all my other guests or people that have been on this thing so far. Where are you from? Like, what is the Pat Belliveau story? And I know this could take a little time, but that's all we got really is time.
Okay.
So why don't I'd like to know where you come from, where you were born, even.
Okay.
And what was your motivation? What motivated you to be? Because in my estimation, and this isn't a slight on anybody. I mean, there's lots of great players in this town, lots of tremendous, in my estimation, world-class players in this town. But you stand absolutely as one of them. And anytime I've done a gig with you, you've always brought this silent accountability with you. That is.
Explain that.
Yeah, sure. For me, it's just it's a matter of having to have my shit together. So, when I come to a gig and somebody says, Pat Bellivau's on the gig, I'm like, fuck. So that means I have to play good tonight. And, I've always, and I mean this, not in any untoward way, but I've always had kind of a man crush on you because to me you sort of personify what it is I go after in my professional career and what I long to achieve or to become. Cool. And every time I hear you play, you're welcome. Every time I hear you play, I hear this legitimacy. I hear this studied but not overtrained ability that you have to, for your instrument, just that connection. And I know you're a big Bob Berg fan, and so maybe that's that's why I like you too, because I love me some Bob Berg.
Bob Berg, Mike Stern albums, those things, yeah.
So I'm curious as to just sort of from inception, what burned you? What was your passion? How did you become
a musician? You mean?
A musician, and a damn good one.
Well, now, okay, I'm going back a number of years now, and I only know this particular story. I only know from my mom because I don't remember it, of course, because I was too young.
Sure.
But my dad, I come from an Army family, so I'm an Army brat. Mm-hmm. So I was born in Wainwright.
Air Force.
Oh, really? Okay. Mm-hmm. So I was born in Wainwright, and there's only two reasons why you'd ever need to live in Wainwright: is A, if you're a farmer, or B, if you're part of the military, because it's the second largest training base in the country.
All right.
So that's where I was born.
The first being which, do you know?
I think it's CFB Gagetown in Oromocto, New Brunswick.
Oromocto, yeah.
I believe that's the largest.
Yeah, because my dad was stationed in Goose Bay.
Okay.
Yeah, we lived in Goose Bay.
Lord Tumner.
Lord Tumner.
Jesus Bay. That's what happened with me. My dad used to be in parades, of course, when on the base and stuff, and my mom would say that whenever there was a parade and the marching band went by, I would go running up to the edge of the parade square and start conducting them, and apparently I was right in time and just had all that. I guess I was channeling my Herbert von Karajan or whatever, and my Berlin Philharmonic thing. Mm-hmm. And then she kind of said, okay, I'm gonna remember that. Mm-hmm. So it was my mom really that pushed me towards music a lot. I took piano when I was 6 and I hated it.
And what age would you have been at the
I was
parade
2.
square?
I was 2.
Two at the parade square.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got into piano when I was 6. I didn't like it. Of course, later I find, as time goes by, I find out just how important piano is to know for anybody, no matter what instrument you play. It's a very, very good, instrument to be able to sit down and at least do something on, right? If nothing else, for understanding chords and progressions and how things work that way for writing or arranging or even just to, intervals and that kind of thing. So I didn't know it at the time, but absolutely, yes. Yeah. And I went into what was then the Mount Royal Boys Choir in 75 and 76, which is now the Calgary Boys Choir. In 75, I would have been 8.
And so you moved to Calgary, or was this?
I was born in Wainwright. When I was 2, we were posted to Ontario. Clinton, Ontario was an Air Force base, I think, or radar base.
Okay.
So that
Clinton, Ontario.
I'm sure your dad probably would have knew that or something.
Probably, yeah.
So we were there.
He was air traffic control. For most of his life.
So we were there for 2 years. So I was born in 67. We were in Wainwright 67, 68, part of 69, I believe. And then my mom will correct me on this because I'm probably wrong. Then we moved to Ontario for 69 and 70. And then my dad was posted here in 71. So I've lived in Calgary since 1971. I was 4, and I've just turned 52.
Right.
So I've been here like the vast majority of my life now.
Right.
So, and
66.
Pardon me?
66.
What?
You were born in 66.
67.
67?
January 1st, 67, 5 minutes after midnight.
Okay.
Tied for second in Canada, tied for first in Alberta.
Were you?
Yes.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
an achievement in and of itself.
Thank you to the doctors of Wainwright General or wherever it was that they made that happen. So
All right.
I was tied with a guy in St. Paul, Alberta for 5 minutes after midnight, and there was a guy down east in Ontario somewhere. I don't remember it really at all or anything about it, but something he was out at 3 minutes after or something like that. So he was the first in Canada. Yeah, but I was tied for second in the country
Not bad.
for the centennial year, 1967. So
Right.
yeah, so I did all my schooling here from kindergarten right up through to university. So I didn't go to one of the big jazz schools or anything like that. But what happened with me is I got some really good teachers, and not just private teachers, but also my band programs. I would have gone through, because I was raised Roman Catholic, I would have gone through the Catholic system. But my mom decided against it. I'm the youngest of 4. My 2 oldest siblings went through the Catholic system. Okay. My brother, who's 2.5 years older than me, he's a police detective here in town now. He and I went through the public systems. The main reason I went through them is because the band programs were stronger then. So she pushed me towards the Calgary Board of Education programs because the band programs were stronger.
So you didn't go to Catholic school?
I did not.
No. Okay.
No, I didn't. And
Do you think you missed anything?
No.
Probably not.
No. It's different now. I mean, there's a lot of the Catholic programs that are stronger now than they were when I was going through. Right. So, I mean, the gap has lessened. But
actually, you might have saved yourself some childhood trauma, but that's another story.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, at least some rapping on the knuckles from a ruler or something.
Right.
You know.
Right.
But anyway, I went to Bishop Pinkham Junior High in my old stomping grounds, and then to Central Memorial High School. Okay. Which at the time, the main thing with them was the marching band, which I'm glad I did it, but it was not my thing. It was all, and I knew it was always going to be the jazz ensemble for me.
When did you pick up the sax?
I picked up the sax going into grade 7. Okay. So this would have been the fall of 1979. Mike Sakich was my grade 7 teacher. He's your old band teacher, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is. He was my teacher at Bishop Pinkham for 1 year. That was his first school. He must have been mid-20s. Really? Probably when that happened.
Well, yeah, I guess, right?
Because the next year, after grade 7 finished, grade 8 started, and there was a teacher strike. So we were off for about an extra month and a half, 2 months. And then that's the year he went to Beaverbrook, and that was his first year there, was my grade 8 year at Bishop Pinkham.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's of course where I know him from, is grade 10. Band.
And I knew you went to Beaverbrook.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So grade 8 was kind of a wasteland for me musically. We had a teacher fresh out of university. Didn't go well. I was almost ready to quit band, kind of thing. Grade 9 came around, and I had a teacher by the name of Dennis Orr come in. And Dennis had been around for a while. He had been at Bowness High School and a bunch of other schools and stuff. And it was really, he was a bit of a taskmaster, but in a good way. And he basically lit the fire and poured gas, on me in here to get me going again. Okay. So, and he kind of lit the fire for me to do this music thing. And I excelled that year a lot. Like my band mark was 100. Based on the tests that I would take.
And were you taking any private study at the time?
I was. I started taking private lessons in grade 7. And I had one teacher in grade 7 who was the conductor of the PPCLI band at the time. Okay. And then in grade 8, I took lessons with the grandfather of a buddy of mine from elementary school through the Mount Royal Conservatory. Okay. And then in grade 9, I think I was still with him in grade 9. In grade 10, I had my first jazz sax teacher. When I moved to Central.
And were these all pretty quality teachers?
I would say. Yeah. I would say. In grade 8, I joined Roundup Band. I was in Roundup Band 1981 for 1 year.
Were you?
Yeah, because when I got to Central, I knew I'd be doing some marching, so I wanted to get some. And there are guys in that were with me in that I still maintain contact with.
Really?
Yeah.
And are they still playing?
Yes, they are. Yeah, some of them are. One in particular. Do you know Lael Johnston at Chestermere High School?
No.
He's a drummer.
Is he?
Yes, he is. He's
Yeah,
the band
no.
director there. He and I were in, and I went to Central with him. He was a year ahead of me.
Okay.
And we were in Roundup Band together in 1981. I think he went and did another year. I didn't. I said, that's good. I know what I'm faced with now when I get to grade 10.
So you went to, where'd you go to high school?
Central Memorial.
Central Memorial.
Yeah.
Right.
Golden
And so
Rams.
you were in band.
Golden Rams.
Woohoo! All right.
Yes.
Go Rams.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Ba-dum-bum-ch.
And
Yes.
so you were in band
Yeah.
for the next 3 years.
Yes. I knew I was going through because when I was in grade 9, when I was really starting to get back into music again, I was thinking, you know what? Is it even possible? Grade 9, what am I going to know? Is it even possible to do this professionally? I wasn't sure if that's something that was even an option. And,
Really?
yeah. My main thing
Was rock and roll
I didn't
a
care.
motivating factor?
I didn't. Yeah, I listened to rock all the time. But grade 9 for me was Men at Work. I loved Zenyatta Mondatta.
Yeah.
The Police. Are you kidding?
Who did?
Stuart Copeland. Hello.
Yeah.
And I was also listening to other things like British invasion groups. And I was listening to Haircut 100. If you remember that band, 'cause they had horns. Look them up. Google them.
Yeah.
They had horns. I gravitated towards bands that had horns most
Tower
of the time.
Power?
Not yet. Eventually,
Okay.
but not yet. My parents, because they knew I was getting serious with saxophone, they started to go out and just take a leap of faith and grab some albums for me to listen to. They came home with 3 different cassettes, if that tells you how long ago this was. They were Scott Hamilton, Tenor Shoes,
Okay.
it was called, Spyro Gyra Morning Dance, and Grover Washington Come Morning.
Right.
Those were the 3 first actual sax instrumental albums that I ever had.
All right.
And I remember them vividly because I would go through them and go, oh, okay, so that's kind of how this, the horn can sound, kind of thing. So, but yeah, I gravitated towards bands that had horns, but not always.
Right.
But Zenyatta Mondatta and Ghost in the Machine that was my jam in grade 9.
Was it?
Yes.
Yeah. Was there any point in that time that you kind of wished you would have played a rhythm instrument, or were you sort of satisfied and locked into your discipline?
When Sakic asked me, I was in grade 6, and we filled out forms saying what instruments we wanted to play. And I remember my choices were, and I don't know why, saxophone first, no idea why. Saxophone, trumpet, God knows why.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, guys, calm down. Trumpet and drums. Drums was an option for me.
Drums.
My dad played drums.
You did?
He did, in a group that was kind of like the Emeralds, all the old, Red Sails in the Sunset and Tennessee Waltz and that kind of thing.
Right.
So maybe that was
he
it.
gigged
And
around town?
He did.
Yeah.
And my uncle played alto sax in that group. So that may have had an influence on it. I'm not sure. I don't consciously remember if that was the case, but it may have been. And my mom played piano once in a while with that group. So it could be that it was just that was it.
So you came from kind of a musical family, would you say?
Yeah, I would say. My grandmother was a singer. My grandfather played piano. My mom played piano. My brother, who was the police detective, played drums for a bit and also trombone. My sister was a singer. My oldest brother played tuba, of all things. Yes. So we all did something. I was the one who was nutso enough to go on professionally. But as I was going through high school, my thing was that I wanted to play pro football. And that's the way I was going. Right. I was working out 5-6 times a week on the weights, upper body one day, lower body the next day, and running probably 2 or 3 miles a day. Every once in a while the protein powder and all that stuff. And I was trying to bulk up so that.
What year was this around? 81, 82, 83?
I graduated high school in 85.
Okay.
So this would have been 83, 84, especially in high school because I got into high school and I was really getting into the football thing. My coach was I don't know if he was first string or I think he had some playing time with the U of C Dinos as a quarterback. And he thought that I had real potential to be able to make the team. So I was working towards that. That's what I wanted to do. The fall of my grade 11 year, I also played organized hockey for 13 years.
Okay.
The fall of that year, this would have been 83, October of 83. I go skating into the corner to grab a puck. I was a defenseman. Guy comes behind me, takes his stick, wraps it right around my shin, pulls me back. I try to get away from him, fall on my back. I go into the corner. My skate hits the boards and turns my ankle that way. Wow. I broke my leg like that, ripped all the ligaments off, pretty much any ligament around my ankle, came right off. And that was the end of my football career.
Simlic was telling a story like that. Yeah. You know, when him and I were sitting down talking.
Yeah.
And that took you out.
That my pro athlete career went out like that. Because then I got a pin put in to put my bone back together. They glued or sewed or crazy glued or whatever the hell they do my ligaments back onto my ankle. And I was on non-weight bearing crutches, like on my right foot, cast all the way up to my knee, plaster. And I could not put weight on it because for fear of bending or snapping that rod or that pin that was in my leg.
Sure.
So I was hopping around for 4 months. And I got off that thing 4 months later. I was like freaked out that I was going to do something to it. Because my orthopedic surgeon said to me, if you do something like that again, you are done. You will limp for the rest of your life or you will walk with a cane.
Right.
And I said, well, I guess I'll get out of the contact sports then. And that, and I was thinking, I'd like to be drafted into the CFL or something like that. I would totally go that direction.
Yeah.
I would have.
Do you think you could have?
I'm not sure. I'd like to think I would have.
Uh-huh.
For me, it was
Did
one
you
step.
have that discipline?
Yes, I would have.
that
Absolutely. I was doing it in high school.
devoted and that?
I was doing it in high school.
Yeah.
I was, for a grade 10 student, I was bench pressing 240.
Were you really?
Yes.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'10". Yeah.
240 in high school.
Yeah.
That's pretty
In
good.
grade 10.
Yeah.
So that's because I was bulking up, right? I was doing all this stuff, and like I said, it was 5-6 days a week. I was nutso about it, because I thought this is what I want to do.
Right.
But my knees are probably better off that it never happened, and sort of other things, right? Now I was playing line in high school. I would never be big enough to play the line in CFL or NFL now. I mean, I never ever thought about the NFL. I just thought CFL would be cool.
Yeah.
I'm not tall enough, so I was thinking maybe I would have to move to linebacker or something like that. But my main thing was I was also a very good punter and place kicker. My average was between 45 and 50 yards on a punt.
Really?
So, yes.
Yeah.
So
In high school?
yes.
Yeah.
So I always had a strong right foot. Of course, that's the one I broke.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So the music gods
emotional-
came down and spanked me.
Hang on a second. Emotionally, psychologically, did that do anything to you? That it kind of
It was
bring you down,
disappointing.
or because you were that young, you were just like, hey, there's other shit to do.
It was disappointing.
Yeah.
Because I went after I got off crutches and I go right across the street from where I live. There's a big long green strip, and we had these big, these with the whatever you call them, the towers with the wires, right? And there was a big diamond in the middle, and I used to think, okay, well, that's my uprights. So I would go back and try to kick through the uprights and stuff, and I still did okay, but I could tell something was different, and it was probably up here,
Okay.
but I just wasn't. I would have been what, 17? So, full of hormones and not knowing what to do and just thinking to myself, not thinking that, you can get out of this funk. I mean, guys have come back from worse than this and really made a career, but I never thought of that. I guess I was just, maybe emotionally I was just all over the map.
Right.
But
And maybe emotionally, do you think you were done with that pursuit?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did. And I wanted to try. I came back later that season, like this, I broke it in October. February, I came back and played a tournament, hockey tournament. I was back on skates and playing again with the same team.
Right.
But then I noticed that when I go into corners or stuff like that, I'm kind of shying away. I was pretty aggressive as a defenseman.
Right.
I'd be nailing guys up against, I broke a guy's collarbone one time unexpectedly, didn't mean to. But, taking guys into the corner, I was like, take no prisoners.
All right.
Right? But then my game changed.
Which might have been what precipitated the injury.
Well, yeah, it could be.
Just that aggressive nature of
I guess.
Yeah.
That could have been it. But I don't think I was reckless, but I was aggressive.
Sure.
And soon as that happened, and I went back to this tournament, and I got back on skates, I could tell I wasn't the same. Like I was shying. I always had this in my mind, my orthopedic surgeon going, "Don't you dare do that again, or you're in trouble," kind of thing. And it got to me. Like this little devil was on my shoulder going, dude, be careful. Oh, no, and all this kind of stuff.
You can't play that way.
No, I can't. That changed my game completely.
Yeah.
And I went, no, this isn't working. I'm going to need some psychological help to get me through this, or that's going to be the end of it. So I decided to be the end of it. And my next thought, because I'm the type of person that if life kicks me in the nuts, then I go, okay, get up, dust off, and go, okay, so what now?
You just got to wear a bigger can,
I guess, yeah, grab a bigger athletic supporter.
Right.
And then, so it's kind of like if you can't be an athlete, you can at least be an athletic supporter.
Right.
But there it is, yes. So my initial thought was, well, you know what? Maybe I'll check out the saxophone thing. I find that to be really fun. That was the next thought that popped into my head.
Right. Now, were you playing a lot at that point? Or were
I was
you
in the
really-
high school band. That was
Yeah.
my thing.
Right.
At the time.
But you
I-
weren't really taking it.
Well, actually,
completely serious.
funny that you mentioned that. In grade 11, my saxophone teacher, a guy by the name of Dave Rice, who doesn't live here anymore, he moved to Toronto years ago, and I haven't heard from him since the late 80s. So I hope he's still on the planet.
Right.
But he was playing in a couple of bands that there were semi-pro or pro bands. And almost right at the same time, both of those bands needed a Barry player. And he took a chance on me to play in them. One was the Wednesday Night Big Band, which still goes. It's been going since 1980. I just did a gig with them last
The
Wednesday.
Wednesday Night Big Band has been going since 1980.
1980, and I
thought it
joined-
was like a 90s creation.
No, it started in 1980. I joined in 1984.
Okay.
I was in grade 11.
In
At the
84?
In 84, yeah. At the same time, there was a trumpet player here, and I don't know if you probably remember, you may remember, named Greg Bush. Do you remember him?
No.
Okay. One of my biggest mentors, probably. He was good friends with Dave Rice, my saxophone teacher. They're originally from Montreal. Actually, Dave was Greg's best man at his wedding.
Okay.
So Greg came out to do a clinic at our school. And the thing with me is that saxophone players will say Barry sax is a bit of a pig and it's kind of hard. I was never told that. Dennis Orr put me on Barry sax in grade 9. And it was blissful ignorance for me. It was just like, oh, this is a big horn, right on. I'll just honk this baby out like reckless abandon. Nobody ever told me it was a pig. I still don't think it is. But
It's a larger instrument.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there are players that say, yeah, I don't play very much. It's too much of a pig. I was never told that.
Right.
It was blissful ignorance for me. It was just another saxophone to me.
Right.
So
Like a bass player saying he doesn't play upright.
Yeah.
It's just too big.
yeah.
Yeah.
But other guys pick up the acoustic and just go, oh yeah.
Right.
And
Just
it
feels like
doesn't
home.
phase them.
Feels
Right?
like home.
Baritone was like that to me. It did not phase me one iota because nobody ever told me it was supposed to be difficult or cumbersome or anything like that. I just was, oh, it's just another sax. Who gives a shit? So that's what it was to me. So I wasn't shy about playing. And I remember at a rehearsal honking, we were playing some funk tunes in the jazz band. I'm honking out the Barry lines. And Greg comes up to me and says, are you busy on Sunday afternoons? I said, no, I don't think so. He says, I have a band that rehearses down at, back when we had Kick 107 FM.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a big glass building right by Morgan's on 17th.
Okay.
And this would have been mid-80s. This would have been 84,
Right.
84, 85. He said, I want you to come down and rehearse with my band and play in my band. It's like, okay. So I went to those, I remember going to those first rehearsals with the Wednesday band and with Greg's band, which was called the Western Connection Big Band.
Okay.
And all of a sudden I'm surrounded by guys that are playing the right notes with the right style and all that stuff. And I just crapped my pants because all I knew was my stage band, right? So I'm surrounded by these guys and they're like pros in town or semi-pros or
And you're
whatever.
still in high school.
I'm in grade 11. So guess what I had to do? I was
Work
like,
hard.
oh God, I died 1,000 deaths. And I thought, okay, if I'm gonna do this, if I'm gonna be in this situation, I better put on my big boy pants a little earlier than I thought
Right.
and actually get at it so I can keep up with these guys, which makes me better, right? I wasn't thinking in those terms then, but I could see that because I had to keep up with these guys, that's what made me better. And that's what I say to my students now.
Yeah, these two guys that were from Montreal.
Yeah.
What's the university there? The music.
Well, McGill is the big
McGill.
one. Both of them went to Concordia.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
So neither went to McGill.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
They were
But
both-
still good players.
Oh yeah, and a great scene.
Yeah.
There's some just crazy mother players in Montreal, and you don't hear of them as much because they get overshadowed by the Toronto guys.
Right.
Right. So because you hear about the Toronto guys all the time within our scene and stuff, but there are guys in Montreal that people don't know about that are just playing their asses off.
Yeah.
Well, they're great
Well,
players
there's-
in every city.
Sure, but there's a great music culture, I think.
Yes. Yes.
Somewhat hidden, and maybe overshadowed, like you
Yes.
said, by Toronto.
Absolutely.
In Montreal, there's
Yes.
a great scene
Yeah.
happening.
And whether it's the French-English thing or whatever it is, I have no idea. But I mean, if you think some of the great bands that come out, like UZEB, for example,
Right.
Alain Caron, UZEB and all that,
Yeah.
the Vic Vogel Big Band, that's another mother big band, that is, when you think of the great big bands in the country, you think, of course, Rob McConnell's Boss Brass, right? Dave McMurdo used to have one in Toronto as well. But Vic Vogel in Montreal, Hugh Fraser in the Veggie Band in Vancouver.
Right.
Bands like, things like that. But Vic Vogel, I've heard them live a few times. they were just a smoking band. And Denny Christensen, if you remember that name at all, trumpet player. He's now, that's the international symbol for trumpet player, by the way.
It is.
And he went on to be the department head at Humber College. And I think he may still be, but yeah, he's originally from the States, came up, and he put together a Montreal big band that was great.
Really?
Great big band, yes.
Yeah.
Denny Christensen big band.
Yeah.
And
my son went to Humber.
Okay.
Yeah, so he knows what's going on there. And that's a good school.
Yes. So he probably knows Denny. He probably knows Denny
He probably
Christensen.
does, yeah.
Denny's a great guy, and he's a great trumpet player, too.
So you were gigging, like I said, or like you said, you were gigging before you got out of high school. You were gigging still in high school and making money, I suppose, a little bit. Yeah. What kind of venues were you playing? Because of what? 16
I also sat in with my dad's band. We would play like the Forest Lawn Legion or something like that, or the Kirby Center. Because you play for the seniors, right? Because that's their kind of music. So
when you could get into the Legion?
Yeah, I could do that. It's kind of like what's happened with the Ambrose band that I'm directing. Last year we were invited to play with a West Winds band at the Black Swan Pub on McLeod Trail down towards South Center.
Yeah.
And I have a couple guys in the band that are underage. They're both in high school, my piano player and one of my trumpet players. And the manager said, they're okay to come in and play, but as soon as you guys are done playing, they have to leave. Okay. So as long as I wasn't drinking anything or any of that kind of stuff, I could go in and do my thing, and then when the band's done, I can leave. So, and that's all that mattered anyway. I'm not, So it was kind of like that for me, because again, I was in grade 11. I was 17, so I was a year under what the legal age.
Sure. So,
but
do you think that would have been a big component to to getting better as a player was playing in these bands and
undoubtedly
making some
undoubtedly, because I'm playing outside of school, right? It's not I fulfill everything I need to do in school, and then I got stuff on the outside of school, and I started making money too, which motivated me, because now, holy crap, I've got money in my bank account, and it's from playing my horn.
Sure. Which is
who would have thunk it?
Yeah, it's a great motivator.
Is that real? Pinch me, please.
Yeah.
Kind of
great.
Yeah, it is.
Motivation.
And in Greg's big band, Greg would, and in the Wednesday night band too, we did things like, I remember in '86, it would have been my first year university. We traveled out to Expo '86 we qualified for the National Stage Band Festival, whatever. We played in the community class, and we played there. In Greg's big band, we played with Big Miller. He brought Big Miller down. We played at some of the venues I remember us playing at were the Penguin Pub, which is by where the Uptown Theater is now on First Street. Right by the AGT Tower, there was a place called the Music Box. These things don't exist anymore.
No.
There was a venue, it was an old Scotia bank called the Bank. We played, it was like an Echoplex, but we played there.
8th Ave, right?
8th Avenue, yeah. We had, I remember while we were doing our gig, we had Alfie Zappacosta come in and listen to us at one time.
Really?
And also, what's his name? That played Potsy on Happy Days.
Oh, shit.
What's his name? Well, when I remember it at 3 a.m., I'll give you a call.
Right.
Yeah, because that's probably what's going to happen.
And what, he just showed up at the club?
Yeah, well, he was doing Stage West or something, so they put him up at a hotel down there.
Yeah.
It's another example of you never know who's going to come in.
Sure.
Remember, if you remember the Paul McCartney and Wings tune, Take It Away? Take it away, yeah. You never know who will be listening to you. Yeah, I remember that. I always remember. You never know who's in the crowd, because I've scored a lot of gigs and recordings and shit just by being in the right place at the right time, and that right person hears me.
Right.
Provided I'm on my game, that's why I'm like, even if I'm sitting in, I want to be on my game as much as I can be for that time, place, and circumstance.
So you're playing in high school.
Yes.
And you get out of high school. See, to me, and I suppose you may prove me wrong here, but to me, you sound like a studied musician, like somebody that came out of, a grander market.
How do you mean grander?
Well, like New York or Boston or Berkeley or something like that. Did you ever study outside of Calgary?
Private lessons and jazz camps, yes, I did.
Yeah.
Actual school, no. And I ended up, they used to have a jazz band, and anybody my vintage would probably remember this that were band geeks like me. Red Deer College used to have an adjudicated festival. And I went up there with my high school band, Central's band, and I was adjudicated by Ed Soph. You must know that.
Yeah.
Ed Soph was my adjudicator. From Woody Herman's band in North Texas? Yes. Yeah, exactly. So Ed Soph was adjudicating us, And from each band, someone was awarded a $500 scholarship to Berkeley. So in our band,
Was that enough back then?
Oh, jeez. Well, let me explain.
Mm-hmm.
So I got it for our band. That was given to me.
Yeah.
And so my band director, Bob Eklund, started researching, because he knew I was going to study post-secondary. I told him that. I said, I'm going to go and study post-secondary. And I thought, if I can't play pro ball, which I wanted to, I'm going to study music. Because I had planned to go as a phys ed major and a music minor when I went to university. I was going to play for the Dinos and be a phys ed major, but I was going to do it like a music minor or be involved in music somehow. I knew that it was never not going to be that way. That was a given. So when I told Bob Eklund that I was going to study post-secondary, he checked out, first school he checked out was Berkeley because of the scholarship. Of course, the $500 scholarship I got probably would have covered airfare to Boston.
All right.
But tuition alone, and this was 1985, tuition alone for a foreign student like me was $9,500 US per year at the time.
Right. Which isn't bad.
No, but I mean, if you consider I don't know what the exchange would have been back then, but this is 1985, right? So it was like 10 grand a year. So I'm looking at 40,000 basically US, because that's not books, that's not a place to live, that's not food, that's none of that stuff. That's just to get in the doors. So that's $10,000 basically just to show up at the school and to be there. You know, if I'm sleeping on the streets and eating out of dumpsters, then I don't have any other expenses. Right. So
you got that $500.
I got the $500. Yes, I did. So that's my airfare to Boston. Not even home, probably, just there.
Right.
Yeah, I'll have to hitch back probably, but whatever. But I mean, I appreciated the fact that I got that.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at 40,000, maybe 50,000 US for a degree. The other one I checked out, and I checked this out on my own, was I'd never been to New York, so I thought, I'd like to check out, New York would be cool.
Right.
So I looked into Long Island University, Brooklyn campus, mainly because of the teachers they had that were there too, right? Let's see, who was there at the time? Was it, I think, oh God,
Big name guys?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I can't remember exactly who they were, but to be specific, but they would bring guys in. I think it was like, you could bring like Joe Lovano in and Bob Mintzer and they'd bring George Garzone in, and they're from Boston, but they would bring them in on residencies and stuff. And I was looking at all these, these types of guys like that they were, like a lot of the heavies in New York.
Right. Which would have been damn good training.
Yes, 18,700 a year.
18,000.
This is 1985.
Right.
18,000, and again,
just tuition.
That's tuition.
Now you got to live in New York.
I got to fly to New York. I got to find a place in New York, which is so cheap, as we know, and food and all that other shit, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm looking. Okay, so we're looking at 20 to 22 grand a year. So I'm looking at more like, 90, anywhere from 90 to 100,000 US for a degree. I said, no, I can't do that. For a music degree, I'll never get out of debt. Holy crap. So, so when talking to my band teacher, he said, for a bachelor's degree, generally...
Was that disheartening at all? I just got to ask.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Because, I wanted to live in New York in the worst way when I was in my 20s.
Sure.
And I just didn't know how that would be. Being a Canadian citizen, and I didn't want to risk being thrown out of the country. And I don't know if I would have been able to return if they would have said out, or whatever. So I didn't want to screw around with that kind of thing. So my band teacher, we were talking, and he said, when you go get a bachelor's degree, it's not as important. I mean, it's pretty general all around what you study. Whole bunch of, like a liberal arts degree kind of thing. When you get into the master's and doctorate level, that's where you start to specialize more. So I said, you know what, maybe I'll just look to my own hometown. And I said to Dave Rice, my teacher, I said, start readying me for an audition for UC. Because I want to do that. I want to get a degree.
Was Mount Royal College?
It was just a college. I could get a diploma, but I wanted a degree.
Sure.
I wanted the 4-year thing.
Was there a good music program there at the time, at UC?
It was. I mean, I fought with many different things.
Such as?
I was a jazz guy in a classical program.
Right.
So was I taken seriously by some, and I'm talking students and profs, was I taken seriously? By a lot of them, yes, but by some, no. You know, I'm playing that, glorified Negro music from Africa, or, or whatever their attitude was. They're like, hey, you guys, you have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, I just,
Right.
I'm not bitter.
Right.
Not at all.
Because jazz was sort of like the I think in terms of classical, tell me if I'm wrong, but kind of like the Baroque period, wasn't it? Where it was more improvised. Am I correct in any of?
Well, you are in a sense with the thing about, and what apparently was never taken into account, was that the people that the classical idiom idolizes, and I'm not speaking of this because I didn't go through a classical program, because I took classical lessons, I took all the classical coursework, and then I was free to take my stuff. Okay. So they don't have to take the jazz stuff and then take the classical stuff, like it would be the exact same. But I had to take the classical stuff and then take whatever jazz stuff I could. So I thought, okay, I'm going to learn some stuff about this whole attitude, and I don't like it when the classical genre and the jazz guys, we butt heads. We shouldn't have to. That shouldn't happen.
No.
It shouldn't happen,
but
it does.
Kind of like Republicans and Democrats.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, I suppose.
On a smaller scale.
On a smaller scale, yeah. It's less militant, maybe, but still stupid.
Yeah.
And that annoys me, because it's like, guys, we're all into music. Can't we just celebrate that?
Right.
You don't have to play what I play, but at least respect what goes into it. Because the one thing I will tell you or anybody else is, because of the fact that I was subjected to this classical stuff, gave me even more respect for what goes into making it happen. Especially because the lessons I took were to kind of form me into a classical soloist, which I would never be. I so appreciate what goes into it, and because I had to do it, I appreciate it more now than ever.
Do you find any of that comes out in your playing, though? I mean, when you play?
Really.
No?
But, well, I shouldn't say not really, but it does, in a sense that playing classical music, the way that I did, my technique and control of the instrument got a lot better, just because it is a different discipline, and it's a pretty strict discipline.
Right.
So, that's why I think you got a guy like Wynton Marsalis, and even Branford. I've heard Branford do some classical stuff that's just fantastic.
Right.
And
where did Branford go to school?
I'm not sure.
New Orleans.
I'm not sure.
Suppose,
yeah, I don't know where exactly, but
right.
But having the classical thing and that whole thing that I did was good for me. Mm-hmm. I know it was.
Yeah.
But I just didn't have the fire in my belly for that music like I did the improvisational creative stuff. But one thing that the people in classical idiom seem to not remember is that the people that they idolized, the Bach, the Mozarts, the Beethovens, were like the Oscar Petersons and Herbie Hancocks of their day.
Right.
They improvise like crazy.
Right.
All the time, within what they do. And I'm convinced that if they were alive now, they'd be hanging out at the jazz clubs as well as the concert halls.
Right.
Because they would look at what's going on and go, holy crap, yes, that's music. I know they would.
Sure.
And then the classical idiom evolved to the point where improvisation started to leave it, to the point where they would write down cadenzas, and you'd play the written cadenza, not make up stuff on your own. That's, to me, musically, it's almost the first sign of the apocalypse. It's like, be creative. There should be, not just read the notes. Now, everybody has it's a slight different take on when they play the notes, but when you're actually free to make something up on the spot, that's where the rubber meets the road to me.
It is.
Whatever idiom you're in, I don't care.
Yeah.
If it's classical, if it's jazz, if it's country, if it's rock, if it's pop, if it's Latin, if it's a polka, I don't care.
Well,
that's where the creativity happens.
I agree, because when you are playing in the moment and improvising, you're using everything that you have facility for in the moment. You know what I mean? You can't sit around and write out that part. You can't think about it too much. What is going to come out of you is what is in you, and what it's really a snapshot of your playing in that moment. And that's why I find jazz so difficult and such a nemesis for me, is that style of music challenges me every time I play it. I mean, just to swing, just enough to swing and to make that feel good.
Yep.
And then what, to improvise on top of that? Are you nuts? I mean, to me, that, I'm not saying that reading ain't tough. You know, reading.
Oh no, it has its
reading
challenges.
has its
Oh,
challenges,
yes.
absolutely.
Does it ever?
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, you can maybe fluff your way through an improvisation. You're not going to fool the best one, but you might fool the least of them. You know, but still, you're not fooling yourself.
No.
And so many times on jazz gigs, the music itself has screamed at me how much I need to learn.
That's never going to stop.
Mm-hmm. No,
Because it's the same
I
with
hope
me.
it doesn't.
Oh, it won't. It
Yeah,
won't.
I hope it
This
doesn't.
is a lifelong pursuit.
Right. But when I'm playing funk or I'm playing rock, I don't really get, you know, the music doesn't scream at me. It whispers to me. It says, you could have done that better. You know, maybe take a look at this. But when I'm playing jazz is like, you suck. You know, like every bar goes by, you suck. You know, and I'm like, oh, fuck you, jazz. And it's like, no, you suck.
I think that might be a bit extreme.
It isn't to me. It isn't to me. And you know, it may be extreme to you, but for me, it's this whole thing where I've played jazz gigs where entire tunes have gone by bar after bar, and I just, you know what I mean? It's not like I want to pack up and go home, but it's almost like I had just fought, you know, like 12 rounds with Muhammad Ali, and of course he won, and I lost. And that's what my experience with jazz has been with me. That's why I love listening to guys like you and other guys in this town that play it so well. Play that music, because every time I play with people like that, I become informed. I get educated. And, you know, it's enough for me to get that free lesson, you know, and still get paid for it. Mm-hmm. And yet learn right there.
Well, and you know
what they're doing.
Well, and the thing is, as I say to people all the time, I say to my students too, being able to improvise, regardless of what genre you're in, is a very important skill to have. And I know that having talked to a handful of classically trained people, it scares them. And that's why they don't do it, because it scares the crap out of them. Why does it do that? It's because you're opening yourself up. You're giving something of yourself that is deep inside here.
Well, not only that, but that it's, once again, like I said, it's that innate, or not innate, but it's all the knowledge you have being petitioned in the moment.
Yes.
So it's calling forth.
And you have to give logic and syntax and whatever other words you want to use to the music at that time.
To me, that's what's scary.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, then you're starting to question your ability. And then you're like, then you feel, these are games. Any game that you can think of that you played with your head, I've done it.
Sure.
I have done it, right? Mm-hmm. So you play games with your head about, okay, I'm basically bearing my soul to the world. And what I know up to this point, any shit that I've gone through, blood, sweat, and tears, from the time I started to now, is a reflection of how I'm going to play now.
Sure, and I think any conscientious player, like you just said, you know, like any game you've played, but any conscientious player, because music is the muse, so music speaks to anyone listening.
Yes.
What you need to do, and you know, I've often thought that, you know, and I alluded to jazz screaming at me, or the muse of jazz, but most of the time, music to me whispers. And that's why, you know, like if I'm too loud or I'm there for my own agenda, you know what I mean? I got my own shit that I want to play, and I've just been practicing, you know, some 9/16, you know, quadruple thing.
Right. Bulgarian folk music. Right,
and that's got to come out on the gig. I never hear what the music is saying to me. Yeah. Because music to me is like, it has a more feminine quality to me than a masculine quality. And it always whispers. And if you're not listening, you'll never hear it. But it'll never yell at you. It'll never scream. It only whispers.
But you know what?
And I suppose, yeah, that whisper in jazz came across to me like screaming and yelling. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because it exposed every part of me that I needed to be.
If I had to make an analogy about how I approach it, from what you just said, it took a while to get here, but my approach with this feminine side you're saying is that I walk up to it, I put my arm around it, and I give it a nice little soft kiss on the cheek, and say, "We're gonna be together here now, and we're gonna enjoy this. We're gonna enjoy this time together." I have to. I mean, it's almost like I read, I didn't finish it, but I read part of Kenny Werner's book, Effortless Mastering.
I read the whole thing twice.
Yeah. And did you notice how much of an attitude was kind of like, don't give too much of a shit. Just go out there, be creative. I mean, care about what you do.
Right.
But don't be so, like wound up about it, right?
Sure.
Because let it flow, you know. And I know it's easy for me to say that, but like I said, anything you've gone through, any mental game you can play with yourself, or any other thing where your head screws with you or whatever, you don't feel like you're doing this right or whatever. I've gone through that,
Right.
and I've had to break it. I've almost quit twice playing, just because. Yes, and because I was at the point where maybe I was fed up emotionally. I don't know what it was. Maybe I needed to be in a job that was more secure. Of course, I would have been a grumpy asshole if I quit playing.
You probably
There's
would,
no way.
as would have most of us.
Yeah, and then that's when the latest time I stopped myself and went, "What the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
You're not. This isn't going to be you.
Right.
You need to do this."
Was that the computer thing that you went into?
Yes.
Was that
No, but it was. I mean, I still played on the side when I had the hosting company, but I actually was looking to go into IT full time, which
Right.
I was going to go to, CDI College or one of these things that offers.
I think I knew that about
Yeah.
you. I think I knew that there was more at play than just you, hosting a server and doing things like
Yeah, and that was a side thing for me, but then I kind of went, this isn't going to work for you because you're going to go to a job where you're sitting at a desk or whatever, doing whatever the hell you're doing, and at some point you're going to go, what the hell am I doing here? I need to be in the practice room, or I need to be listening, or I need to be out gigging, or whatever, because I can't leave that. Like, it's like one of the deepest loves and passions I have in my life.
that. Right.
It just is. I can't not do it. I can't. It's almost like, and I look back and I go, and I know this sounds zen and kind of weird and shit, but it's almost like it chose me. I didn't choose it. It went.
That's what every, once again, conscientious musician, and I speak to that now, but every conscientious musician that didn't necessarily go and get a day job, that burned with a passion for this thing, once again, the music informs you more than you informing.
Yeah, and people, a lot of people will probably not understand that, but and some will.
Yeah,
but
that's another point I have, because I wonder, because I've always been burdened from this. Anjay and I talked in the first thing.
Drummer talk.
Drummer talk. That's right. Don't get us started, man. We don't shut up.
Well, it's not like this. Not any different with the sax guys. But
it's just a love, right?
Absolutely.
And I was pulling pots and pans out at 6 months old before I could walk. I was arranging them around me as a drum set, and I didn't even know what a drum set was. Yeah. And then I was grabbing spoons or whatever, and no one told me to do this. I don't even know if I was cognitively had enough cognitive awareness to actually know what I was doing. But I was doing this thing.
It was blissful ignorance. You didn't give a shit because all it was about was doing that.
Right.
You just knew you needed to do that.
Well, that's it. And I just wonder if we don't all have that for ourselves. And I wonder how many times, or how many of us as individuals lead a life. And I suppose maybe that's what all these YouTube, things about inspiring yourself and getting rid of the day job. Or maybe that's what all these things, where they all come from. But to me, it seems that possibly most people have that burden. Yet maybe most, for some reason or other, just are not able to hang on to that, or it doesn't hang on to them.
Or they develop hang-ups. We are our own worst enemy. And here's another case in point. Going back to grade 9 with this band teacher, Dennis Orr, I remember we were doing a song, a concert band song, which I loved, written by Jay Chataway, if you know that name. Used to be in Maynard Ferguson's band.
Okay.
And it was a concert band song called Parade of the Tall Ships. It was wonderful. And it was grade 9 for me. And Dennis Orr says, we had one French horn player, and I was playing alto sax in the concert band. He says, I want you to play the French horn parts. And I was like, okay, sure, give me one. Thing is, alto sax is an E flat, French horn is an F. So I have to transpose up a whole tone on every note on my part. And I just went, okay, I guess that's what I have to do.
And you did it.
And it didn't take me that long at all, because I didn't have a hang up that was tough.
Right.
I never went, oh shit, how am I going to be able to do that? I got to read everything up a whole step now. I'm in grade 9. I didn't care. It's just like, give me the music, I want to play it.
Correct.
So I just have to remember, oh yeah, that's a whole step. So it took me a little bit to get it, but after that I was like, me and Maureen Edgar, my French horn player friend, colleague in my grade 9 band, were just belting that shit out, you know. But nobody ever said, that's a difficult thing when you think of it. Or for a grade 9 student, you know, I mean, that's just not, but it tells me something about the fact that we get so many hang-ups about what we think we can do and we can't do, that most of the time it just, you fall apart.
Well, I did that, you know, I taught my students that way as well. Like, I would give them difficult things to play because they had no reference for what was and what
Exactly.
wasn't.
If
Right?
you have no reference, you're good.
Right.
Same
You know,
with when I was playing baritone.
Yeah, if I hand you a rhythmic illusion thing, and you're playing that at 9, you don't tend to question, you know, what's difficult. It's only until you get old enough and get informed enough,
Right.
and hear the word "no" enough to realize that things may be more difficult than other things. But you know, I had 9-year-olds playing rhythmic illusion, and you know,
Because it's about the music, not about all these mental games we play with,
exactly
with ourselves.
For all intents and purposes, a 9-year-old shouldn't be able to do that. But that's only because we've informed ourselves that they shouldn't or
Yes,
they can't.
exactly.
And nobody told them that.
Exactly. If
Right.
you plant that seed and make it sound like that, then that's how they're going to react to it.
Yeah.
You know, something I just thought about too is at Ambrose University, we have a summer jazz camp. She's probably going to hate that I'm going to mention this, but I'm going to. My sister-in-law attended. My wife's sister attended. And for her final concert, the combos came out and played and stuff. And she's always been kind of shy about improvising. But I think she had an epiphany because she played the final concert and played well, like her combo, and she sounded well, very good and all that, and blah, 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 and everything went great. And then she wrote in a journal later, she shared it with me. She said, later on, I just broke down. Like every emotion just came out. I'm like, and I was just reading, and she said, couple of reasons why. Yeah, there was nervousness. Okay, fine. But also that after all this time, I finally did it. And it went great. You know, why did I wait this long? Like that, I think when I'm reading, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, but it's like that, whatever, there were hang-ups that were gone. Like she actually did it in front of people, and it felt great.
Right.
You know?
And maybe the freedom felt great.
Exactly, the freedom.
And I mean, the release of that,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
of that misinformed.
And when I was
concept.
reading that, and she's saying, I completely broke down, I just lost it. I went, perfect. Because even though that might have felt awkward to just let it all go, it hit you in the right place, finally,
Yeah.
right? And you just, all that outpouring of emotion just went, yeah, I did it. And it felt great, you know? And I remember that. I remember when I started to really get into what I was doing enough that it was really shit was really starting to happen. I couldn't get enough of it, you know? Yeah, who needs meth and heroin and cocaine and all that stuff? I can't get any higher than when I'm on stage and the shit is clicking.
That's what I've always.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Sure, I've always said that. You know, I've done, you know, a lot of gigs. And, you know, I've done a lot of club dates and a lot of bar gigs and stuff like that. You know, I've watched a lot of guys get high. I've watched a lot of guys get drunk. And to me, music is its own reward. You know, to me,
And none of us are bigger than it.
Well, that's just
the other thing.
well, that's just it too, right? And not only that, but it is sort of there is a purity to it, a righteousness to it, in the sense that it won't that music won't take you down,
No.
like something else would. You know what I mean? And I've just always felt that music is its own reward, and you don't need. There's nothing that can get you, like you said, higher than the experience of playing well, playing great, knowing that you're playing great, connecting to the other musicians and feeding off them, and maybe them even feeding off you, and you getting to the end of the night and going, you know what, I accomplished something tonight, and that emotional, that thing that took you to that other place. Once again, I've never, you know, and I did drugs when I was a kid, but there was nothing that ever made me, that ever got me that connected to the universe as playing with other people and appreciating what I do in conjunction with what they're doing.
So we have to give it the utmost respect. So when I hear guys, like there are guys that get into playing, because they figure they'll score the chicks, right? And saxophone too is one of those instruments that guys like to do that, right?
Right.
That wasn't right. It wasn't my motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was, it wouldn't have worked for me anyway. So it doesn't matter. But it was about the music first and foremost.
You are a humble man.
Well, it's never. Yeah, that whole thing about I'm a sax player, I get all the chicks. That bullshit. Whatever.
Right, but people say that about drummers too, and I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Like, do you want to tell me that?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no, that's not true.
Yeah, exactly. But when I go and play, I leave it on stage. Whatever I try, and then if you've noticed the gigs that we've done together and gigs that I do with other people, when I'm done afterwards, I might hang out for a bit and talk and stuff like that, but I just go home and I maybe watch the news and crash. Right. Because really, like a lot of guys, they'll play gigs and they'll go hang for like till 4 a.m. or something like that. Maybe was like that in my 20s, but for me, especially when I'm older now, I save up to when I get on stage, I'm just going to do absolutely best I can for that time, place, and circumstance, leave it on the stage, collect my check and go home. Not that I'm antisocial,
right.
But it's just I'll hang out for a little bit. But after I'm done my job, after I've done that, I'm like, this is what I came for. This is the most important thing to me.
It's funny that you say that because I don't think there's anybody that leaves a gig quicker than me. Although I do have to tear down a shitload.
Yeah, you've got a bunch of crap to put away.
But I leave. I don't want to be there after the gig. If I could go back to a hotel room and maybe talk to a guy or, whatever, like a singer in the band or something like that, I don't mind that one-on-one.
Yeah.
I do not want to hang out after the gig. And you just, with what you just said, I think you may have defined part of the reason why that is, and that is because I think I leave my DNA on the stage. You know what I mean? Like there's so much that comes out of me that I've just got nothing left, and I don't want to give. I don't want to give anything else. I don't want to give anymore. I've talked to singers about that, especially about if you want to be a good singer, then you better leave your DNA on the stage. Mm-hmm. Before you leave, because then you're connected, then you're giving,
and you have to give the music the utmost respect that you can, mm-hmm. and put your best foot forward to do it justice every time. Because if you don't, I don't want to be on stage with you. I don't.
Right.
I don't.
Right. And
this is not a hobby for me.
No, I'm glad you're saying
this shit is real.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're saying these things because I felt the same way. And sometimes you feel like maybe you're being ignorant. Maybe you're just an arrogant douche. But
I thought so too.
But then I think I don't want to be on stage with people that are not. I've fought over the last couple of years, and this is something maybe we'll talk about a little bit, but, I've done a lot of club dates, and I've seen what's been going on in clubs, and the declination of quality, of mastery, of excellence in clubs. And, how many times are people looking at me saying, don't play that. I don't get that. Why did you... I had this one gentleman, I took a drum solo at a club. It's a couple of years ago. And we went outside at the break, and he said, why'd you play that? And I said, well, what do you mean? He's like, why'd you play that solo? Why'd you play all that stuff? And I'm like, well, because it's a solo? And he's like, yeah, I know, but, I don't get that. I don't think other people get that. And I'm like, I'm not here to educate people, dude. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm not up here as a professor. I'm up here as someone, that is emoting. Someone that is giving everything that I can to people that don't understand in the hopes that someone may appreciate the fact that I know something that they don't. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That they may get inspired. I'm not here to teach you anything. If I have to teach you your instrument, you shouldn't be doing this gig.
Mm-hmm. So and I shouldn't be on stage with you either.
Well, and that too. So don't question what I'm doing, because what I'm doing is sincere. What I'm doing is coming from everything I have within me, and that's why I'm giving it. I'm not doing it because I'm a douchebag and I want to be heard. I mean, the concepts that I play, it takes more than being a douchebag. So even if I was a douchebag, and I'm not saying I'm not, but even if I was, it wouldn't be enough to play the things I'm playing.
Right.
So it can't be coming from that place.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I had to get that out myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The stuff I play, I don't play it to be a dick. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I listen every day. Every day. And you can ask my wife, you can ask my family members. I take time to myself with no distractions, with headphones in, and I just listen to stuff. I listen to jazz, I listen to funk, I listen to rock, I listen to Latin, whatever. I got a whole cross section of stuff on my phone. And I listen, but the way I listen, I don't listen with it as background, behind I'm doing something else. I listen with my eyes closed, and whatever instrument is playing, I pretend that I am that soloist. And I'm in a concert hall or in a stadium or in a club or whatever. And it could be a drummer, it could be a guitar player, but that's me up on stage tearing it up. Because in my mind, it's like, I need to go towards that level. That's the kind of playing I want to be like, subjected to all the time.
Right.
I can see myself doing that. I've had to do that too because certain venues made me nervous, which is ridiculous because it is a psychological thing. But I took the idea of what the professional athletes do, because they visualize crossing the finish line, winning the medal, all that stuff.
Right.
So I started visualizing. And I read, it's funny, I start books and I never finish it. I read part of the book of The Inner Game of Music, which was based on the inner game of tennis.
Right.
So it talks about psychological stuff. But when I studied a little bit, checking out athletes and stuff and what they do, professional athletes, and being at the top of their game and stuff. And a lot of them said, especially the Olympic ones, we're talking about visualization. So any venues I went into and how can a venue make you nervous? Like, how retarded is that? But anyway, that was like that for me. So
Beatnik did. Beatnik always made me nervous.
The university theater did for me.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if it's because, I had a lot of colleagues and friends and colleagues, and we were, whatever. But for a while, I would put on my headphones and I would visualize whoever I'm listening to. It could be Steps Ahead, it could be the Basie Band, it could be whoever, it could be Tower of Power, it could be Earth, Wind and Fire. Men at Work, I don't give a shit who it is. But I would visualize myself on stage and I would be the one playing that solo. Because if I visualize myself being in that venue, tearing it up, full sellout crowd, then when it actually does happen, or if it happens, my mind has seen this and has been comfortable with it. And after a while, that totally went away. I could go into the university theater and it was like, this is another venue to me. That shit is done. That shit is done, right? But it's again, and I go through a lot of this stuff with students, the psychological barriers they put up for themselves. And again, that's why I mentioned my sister-in-law, because I think she had psychological barriers. Or, not wanting to open up musically to people. Right. To me, I'm at the point now where I love it so much and I'm so passionate about it, I have to get it out. Whether I'm writing it down as a chart or I'm just playing live, I just have to, it's there, it needs to get out, right? It's just, it has to happen.
Sure. Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it, and I've often thought about, people that play musical instruments as, the fact that if this was the MMA, or boxing, or something like that, you don't go into the ring unless you know exactly what the fuck you're doing. Because if you don't, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you and possibly die. You know what I mean? Especially if you really don't know what you're doing. And that's not to say that anybody's going to die from playing shitty music, although culture might. But
that could happen.
But individually, maybe nobody's going to die. But I think the premise is sound to state that if you can't go into a boxing ring that way, why would you go into a club that way? Why would you go up to do something that you're not necessarily being honest with yourself enough about in order to do? Because nobody's going to blow smoke up your ass if you get the shit kicked out of you. It's pretty obvious you didn't meet the challenge. Yet somehow we blow the smoke up people's asses that maybe not are necessarily proving the same thing in other disciplines.
Do you want another story?
Yeah.
Just right along those lines?
Sure.
Again, this guy that was my mentor, Greg Bush, my main mentor. In his big band, he had an arrangement of There Will Never Be Another You, the very first standard I ever learned. And his arrangement was based on a Jerry Mulligan, Chet Baker recording. And of course, I was playing baritone in his big band. So I open up the sheet, 96 bar solo. All I see is chord symbols and slashes. No notes, nothing. And I'm just like I turned about as white as your jacket, and I just lost it. And I took him aside after. I said, "You're going to have to help me with this, because I need to know what all this means." Now, not a big deal. But then, I was dying 1,000 deaths. So he was really helpful with me to get my shit together on that tune for that arrangement. So now this is years ago. I don't know if you remember this club. There was a club just east of 17th Avenue and 4th Street Southwest called Marty's. Do you ever remember Marty's?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
It was a hole in the wall. I think it's called Cilantro now or something.
Oh, yeah,
else.
okay. I don't
Small building, but Marty's was like the jazz club in Calgary for a while. He and Greg had booked a quartet gig, like piano, bass, drums, and trumpet. And he invited me down to play. I knew two things. I knew a B-flat blues, and I knew There Will Never Be Another You. And he knew that. So we had decided that I would go down and sit in with these things. And I didn't know the guys in the band or anything. Well, I knew the drummer, Dave Luker, who's not here anymore. He moved to Montreal. And I kind of knew the other guys, but not really well. But anyway, I brought my baritone in, sat down. He saw me, because he invited me down. So he played a couple more tunes, and he said, "Now we're going to invite a young up-and-coming saxophone player, baritone saxophone player named Pat Belliveau, up to the stage." And I get up there, and he goes, "So what do you want to play?" And I went, "Wow, how about a B-flat blues? How about we just get warm on that?" He goes, "Sure, absolutely." And I knew a couple of heads, so we chose one that I knew. We played that, and I played well in it. And then after we finished that, he turns to me and goes, "Why don't you call one more? Anything in particular you want to do?" And I'm like, "Wow, so many choices. Wow, so many tunes. How about There Will Never Be Another You in E flat?" Yes, that's what he said. He said, "That's a great choice. Another You, E flat, guys. Here we go." And then I played that, and I played well in it. And after that, I put my horn away and I sat down, and I listened to them for the rest of the night, because I went there knowing something. And I tell this to my students: don't go to a jam not knowing anything. Right? If you know one tune, play the shit out of that tune, then sit the hell down.
And learn something.
And come back next week with another 2. Then you got 3. Come back next week with another 2. You got 5. Come back the next week with another 2. You got 7, et cetera, et cetera.
We're losing that, especially.
Absolutely. Jam etiquette, guys.
Yeah.
Jam etiquette. It's a thing.
Yeah.
It is a thing.
Yeah.
Don't go up there, and like I said, as Paul McCartney and Wings said, you never know who will be listening to you. So when you get up there to play, make sure you're playing the best you can for that time, place, and circumstance.
And I think most importantly and fundamentally, when you say you never know who's going to be listening, the problem is that you're listening to you. And how honest are you going to be with yourself? It doesn't matter if fucking Sting is there. If you can't be honest with yourself, then and yet I've known because when I got back from London last year, I started going out to jams a little bit, to clubs, and I thought it was kind of not great when I left, and it's just completely. You know what I mean? It's kind of fallen apart. The wheels have come off, and there's people getting up there. It's almost like karaoke, where people just want to pat each other on the back and say that was a really good job. And I don't want to be negative, but I do want to be honest, and that's what I see. And to me, that's not what I want to do. That's never what a jam was. If you went to Chicago in the 50s or the 40s, if you went to New York or anywhere south of the border.
It was cutthroat.
It was a cutting session, right? Where you got up and you played. If you didn't play well, and most of the time, if you were a kid, you probably didn't. Yeah. Especially in light of some of the fucking greatness that was, that was there at the time, and so you got the shit kicked out of you.
But we live in a day and age where you get a trophy for participating. So we have to be careful with that, because that's not always reality, right? If somebody goes up to a jam, and somebody's in the audience who's looking for a sax player, 2 guys go up. One sounds fantastic, has their shit together, knows their instrument. The other one goes up there and sounds like a car horn or a traffic jam. Who do you think's going to get called for a gig? Who do you think's going to?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I get that. I suppose, you also use the term that I haven't heard before, but I kind of inquire about it, was musical apocalypse.
Yeah.
And I've never heard the term. I know what it means to me when you said it. But can you explain that a bit? Because I think that goes on to explain, because you say one guy plays great, the other guy doesn't play great, but there's not a lot of gigs left.
No.
And so, you know what I mean? It almost seems to me like people would rather pat the guy on the back because there's nothing for the great guy anyway.
Well, I mean, and with the guy that doesn't sound as great, at least you're up there trying. I'll always give you marks for that. Mm-hmm. You're out here, you've taken the time, you want to get up there and you want to play. Mm-hmm. And I get that. There's always room to get better. But you have to be real with yourself. Mm-hmm. If you do go up there and sound like a car horn or a traffic jam, you have to be honest with yourself. First of all, record yourself to see how you sound. I recorded myself constantly. I would do festivals and stuff, and my parents would come and listen. I had them in the audience with a ghetto blaster, recording when I was playing, like in the big bands and stuff, especially if I had a solo. Not because I want to go and be all narcissistic and blast my solo around the house. No, I want to hear what I did. If I sounded like a horse's ass, or if I sounded okay, or a mixture of both. Right. And whatever sounded like ass, I have to fix. Right? Yeah. The good stuff I can take out of there and go, yeah, that worked. Mm-hmm. The bad stuff I go, okay, that didn't work. What can I do to make it work? Right? It's a constant study and it's a constant state of correction.
Right. And a constant motivation for somebody that cares.
But if you don't know that you're sucking, if you're sucking and people are going, oh man, you sounded so great. I mean, you want to be supportive, yes, but you have to be real. Mm-hmm. And as a teacher to my students, I have no problem saying, you know what, you sounded great there, but that part.
Right, and no. I suppose that, because, that's a virtue that's not, it doesn't matter how bad the scene gets, you don't lose virtue because of, because the planet is kind of shitty at the moment for musicians. If we keep our virtue, maybe there's a chance it may come back. If we lose our virtue, there may not be a hope in hell. And to me, that is maybe what musical apocalypse is part of.
We have to be careful, and years ago, I can't remember how many, it was probably just the late 90s, early 2000s. One of my teachers was a Swiss alto player by the name of George Robert, who studied with Phil Woods and Bob Mintzer. And George and Phil came up and did some playing here. And we went out for dinner to one of my favorite Italian restaurants at the time, De Guido, which doesn't exist anymore. And Phil proceeded to get rather juiced. And that's what he does. And but as what happens with a lot of people when they have a few, the filters come down, and the emotions come out. And I remember him sitting at the table. We were talking about Charlie Parker and him when Charlie Parker was playing in New York. Phil was across the street, and he would go and listen to Parker play, and Phil thought that his horn wasn't sounding good and all this stuff, and he gave his horn to Parker to play, and he sounded like $1 million, and Phil was like, what? He says, it's no longer about the horn. It's no longer about the neck strap, the reed, the mouthpiece. It's all about up here. Right. And it's all about, because Parker can grab anything and sound awesome on it. But anyway, he started to get very emotional saying, we need to preserve this music. Guys went through a lot of shit to keep this music alive. And because he's not convinced that's going to happen. And he was, he's not around anymore, of course, but he was very, very emotional about this. And he started tearing up and talking about how much this music meant and means to the guys that he played with and to him, and how that legacy needs to keep moving. And he hates the big music schools. I remember he and I, he was sitting right next to me. He and I were talking for a while. And he paid me a great compliment that I'll remember till the day I die. George came over and said, so what do you think of Pat as a player? And Phil Woods turned to me and said, he plays like a motherfucker. And I went, holy shit, Phil Woods just told me that? What? Like, hello? Pardon that language, Mum, but that's what he said. So I've got that quote on my website. I was just like, holy shit, Phil Woods just told me that. I can't believe it. But I think the rest of my year was completely made at that point.
Sure.
But I said to him, I went to university and I got a degree, but I didn't go to one of those big jazz schools. And he leans in and he goes, good, I hate that shit. Because it's like, he says, everybody comes out of there sounding the same now. They're going through the same method books, doing the same shit. It's not personal anymore, right? It's all cookie cutter.
All right.
And he hates that. Because you start to hear that, oh yeah, that guy, you can hear that he went to Indiana. You can hear that he went to North Texas. You can hear that he went to Berkeley. You can hear that he went to the University of Miami. You can hear that he went to wherever, right? Because they start to sound the same. They do, I think his main thing there was that we're not preaching individuality anymore.
Right. Personal creativity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's become a science, not an art.
Right.
Or it's becoming a science.
And you know what?
That's what he's scared of, or was scared of.
Well, and you know what? That is scary. And I think even what's scarier is the fact that in Canada, we can't even boast of having that many places that we have a problem with. You know what I mean? That to me is scary.
So when we're talking about my history and where I went to school and all that stuff, I went to school here. I didn't go to a big jazz. UFC is not a jazz school. It's not. But I got a degree which I wanted to do because that opened doors for me in other areas. I wouldn't be able to be teaching at Ambrose if I didn't have a degree, as an example. And there's other things that I didn't do, or that I couldn't do, pardon me, if I didn't have post-secondary. But that didn't define me as a player. It didn't mold me into how I sound now. That I'm a complete Heinz 57 of a lot of stuff. Not only did I go there, but I took some lessons with Bob Mintzer. I took a lesson with George Coleman. I took a lesson with Roger Rosenberg, who used to play Barry in Bob Mintzer's big band, now plays baritone with Steely Dan out of New York. I took lessons with Bobby Shew. I took lessons with a bunch of other guys, Pat LaBarbera, Kirk McDonald from Toronto, all these guys.
Right.
And to get a whole cross-section of what can they show me that works for me. Because then I get stuff from all over the place. So it's not a defined thing. Michael Brecker summed it up once, I think, better than, I guess in a way that I would too. Because everybody wanted to sound like him. Now, he's influenced me too. I cannot lie.
Yeah, sure.
Bob Mintzer, Bob Berg, Michael Brecker, Jerry Bergonzi, all those Steve Grossman, all those contemporary tenor players. Even Chris Potter a little bit, Josh Redman, Eric Alexander, who I think is fantastic, in the New York scene.
Yeah.
I've had an influence from all of them. But Brecker said one time, he said, I know a lot of people like to emulate my sound. He never did like his sound, really. Funny enough, Theo Wane told me that. I endorsed for Theo Wane mouthpieces. And Theo and Mike Brecker were working together on some mouthpiece stuff, I think a year or two before he died. And he said, I never really liked my sound. I was never really into that sound, but Guardala made me that mouthpiece, and I got used to it and stuff, and people just really started gravitating towards that sound. So it's not the sound he was envisioning, apparently.
Right.
I had no idea. But one of the other things he said that I think was real valuable when he was doing a clinic at North Texas or something, I think I saw it on YouTube or something. I can't remember exactly. That may not be accurate, but something along the lines of he said, a lot of people want to sound like me. He said, if you like my sound and how I play, don't just listen to me, but listen to the people that I listened to. Right? Because that's what molded him. And he said that's anywhere from John Coltrane to King Curtis to Jimi Hendrix to whatever. Like he said, and it's the same with me. Like if you were to go into my phone and see all the different things I'm listening to, I've got a little bit of Coltrane in there. I've got a little bit of Tower of Power in there. I've got a little bit of the Basie Band in there. I've got Boston, because I will love Boston till the day I die, especially the very first album and Don't Look Back.
Right.
2 favorite albums. Again, Supertramp, Even in the Quietest Moments, and Breakfast in America, both in there.
Even in the quietest moments.
Both of those albums, I will never stop listening to. And also because John Helliwell is a hell of a sax player and clarinetist.
Right. The drummer was amazing. I remember listening to the drummer growing up. Even now, I listen to those tracks.
Yeah.
Even in the quietest moments, Crime of the Century.
Yeah.
And the way that guy could roll, just the way he could place his notes and the creativity. To me, Supertramp. Nobody talks about Supertramp anymore.
And they should.
In my estimation, they were one of the best bands that ever really existed. I mean, I know Paul McCartney had the Beatles, and I know he had Wings, and it's great. But to me, Supertramp was really not much less, maybe than the Beatles. But Supertramp is just an amazing band with amazing. Even in the quietest moments, there's so many different movements in the different tunes, you know, in that record. That to me, it just, I don't know, it's so emotive.
And case in point on how that music influenced me when I was younger. Because, and this is why I don't apologize for what I listen to. I'm not a hardcore jazz guy. I love jazz because it's prepared me for any playing I've had to do. Because it's so difficult. And I want to be true to it. So that means I'm a permanent student. Right? Till the day I breathe my last breath, and even then I'll say, shit, I didn't do enough, or I should have done more of that.
Right.
But initially, when I was listening to, for example, even in the quietest moments, I sat down at my parents' piano for hours figuring out Downstream. You know that song? Took a Boat Sunday?
Yeah, beautiful.
A major 7, first chord. I'm like, I don't know what that is. You could call that a fish or a chicken or a whatever. I don't know what that chord is, but damn, I like that sound. And I would just play that. And I learned that whole tune by ear on the piano. And I learned all those chords. I had no idea what they were called, but holy shit did I like them.
Yeah.
And I just went down and I turned that thing on and I played along with it.
Right.
And I loved it. And finally, school for me helped me define what I was hearing. Because I heard, I'm a sound junkie. I hear sounds and I go, holy shit, that's cool. But what is it, right? I have to go to school to find out what that is so I know what I'm dealing with, right? I need to learn the math so that when I get the math here, and I have a strong ear. I was tested as a kid, auditory kinesthetic learner. So listening and doing. That's how I learn the best. So I take the math of all that stuff, put it together with my ear, put them together, and I'm trying to be unstoppable.
And don't you think that both are important, though?
Absolutely. When guys say things to me like, "Oh, I don't learn to read because it'll stunt my creativity," I go, "Yeah, you're a jiver. You're full of shit.
I was watching
I don't buy
YouTube.
that."
Yeah, I was listening to somebody pontificate on YouTube not long ago, and he's like, and I took this lesson, from really good guys, and they talk about the E's and the A's and the ands and everything, but man, you just got to feel that. And I'm like, dude, depending on the tempo of something, and depending, you know what I mean, like if you need to know something at 100, you might be able to feel that E at 100. But if it's at 200, you can't feel that, man. You got to count that. Once you count it and once you know it mathematically, get rid of the math. Then hear it and feel it just like you want. But you can't get away from the math. You just can't until you've got it. You can discard it, right, and empty it.
That's the goal.
Right, that is the goal.
How many times have you heard somebody say, "You learn all that shit, then you forget it"?
Right.
I don't forget it. I just file it away in the hard drive up here to be recalled anytime I need it.
Yeah.
Right? Once I understand the math and the relationships, and this also helps because, I was a harmony teacher at U of C. I was a mathematical and musical idiot. So I came out of high school. I failed all my entrance exams to get into university, like dismally. I had to take remedial theory, like this is a staff. Every good boy deserves fudge.
Oh, wow.
FACE. I'm like, okay, I got this part. After I graduated, of course, I was extended time there because life got in the way. I went on the road for 2 years with big bands in the States. Another good story for you. We have to have like 9 hours of shit here, but whatever.
Yeah, I know. You just talked about, filing things away in the hard drive.
Yeah.
It just made me think of something.
Yeah, so when I graduated, I was hired back to teach lessons, jazz musicianship, and imagine, jazz harmony. So I turned that around. I shock even myself now. Right. But the more I learned and the more that I understood what the math behind the sounds I was hearing was, I was like, this is perfect. Because now I can use that even more. It's not just a sound. I have a name to that sound. There's a logic to it. Right. I'm always about the sound though. Right. Sound is first and foremost with me. If I had to choose between playing by ear and knowing theory in and out and backwards and upside down, I would rather go by ear.
But thank God.
But thank God I don't have to. I can put them both together. I'm also of the belief of when faced with a choice, take both.
Right.
So that's the thing. I want the ears, I want the strong ear, but I want the math. So I can put them together. And when I need to be mathematical, if somebody throws a chart in front of me I have about 30 seconds to scan this progression to make sure there are no pitfalls or no weirdness or angular ambiguity. And I'm put on the spot like that a lot. There are times I've gone into a studio where I'm supposed to play a solo on somebody's album and I don't have a chord sheet. They say, we'll play the track a couple of times and then you can do your thing.
Right. Yeah. Most of the
How many
records-
people will shit their pants at that minute?
Most of the records I've done that way.
Yeah.
I've
So
done
I
it on
stop
the
and I
show.
go, I'm not going to crap my drawers. I'm going to sit, I'm going to listen through, and I'm going to go, okay, that's a dominant chord. Okay, yeah, well, this is 2/5 to that key. And I will be analytical like crazy. And I'll just follow that. Okay, it goes to the 4 chord there. Okay, there's a 5, a 5, a 5, and all this other shit. And I'll just analyze the progression as it's going along. And then I'll go, okay, I got this. Because I can analyze as I go.
Sure.
If I'm unsure of something, I'll go, usually the person who wrote it is nearby, or they might have something. I say, help me out with the chord in whatever bar. And I'll say, I think it's a blah, 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 but just confirm that with me.
Right.
And then they'll tell me. And I'll say, okay, good. All right, great. That makes sense. Okay, and then, okay, let's roll. Because, you know, in certain instances in the studio, time is money.
Oh, almost
Right?
always.
So,
right?
almost always.
Yeah.
So
that's why it's hard
you can't
to get
fart
into.
around.
Yeah, that's why it's hard to get into a studio because, you know, guys like, you know, before I moved back here in 95, I moved to Baton Rouge in 92, studied in New Orleans for a while, and I did close to 100 records when I lived in Baton
Great.
Rouge. And like individual records. And then I came up here and I couldn't, you know, I didn't have enough money to buy my way into a studio. Nobody was like, you know, and I'm like, I've done 100 records. And they're like, oh, that's good. You know, but nobody wants to give you a chance because every minute is money in the studio. And it took me a while to get, you know, to convince people that, hey, you know, I know what I'm doing. And then you have to convince them in that moment that you really do. Speaking of hard drives, I want to, you know, I don't know. I mean, a conversation with you could last all night.
It could.
And I mean that benevolently. I mean that with much love, because you got a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of knowledge, and I appreciate just listening to you and talk to you. And I hope that all you guys out there appreciated this. I want to ask you one more question.
I was going to say, ask me anything else you want to know before we shut this
Yeah,
down.
no, because you never really defined it. So just in a sentence, or maybe a couple. Musical apocalypse, what did you mean? I don't know what you mean.
Where the quality of the music is dying. Even pop music of years and years ago had quality to it. Nowadays, it's let's throw some people in a room, hopefully they'll get along, and we'll make millions of dollars off of them. That's a pretty sad state of affairs.
I don't think that it means that because I think that people, I don't think there's, well, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'll tell you what, I mean, in my estimation, in terms of my instrument anyway, drums, there are drummers now that are doing things that even Weckl wasn't doing when he came up. You know what I mean? Even Vinny, but most of these guys, you know, the gospel chop movement, and I don't even know if I can say that word. It's a weird thing. They've been taking guys to court over saying gospel chop, which is weird to me. But you know, these guys have took what Weckl did and what Vinny did, and they've turned it on its head. And just come up with so much, you know, and now you have, you know, the programs at Berklee going through, and although, you know, like you said, you know, some of these guys may sound very similar to the other one, the level of playing has gone up. So the players in these records, you know, on these records, and I would say the producers probably and everything else, are masterful musicians. They're not dummies. They're not idiots, yet I think that they are using their powers nefariously. That's my contention.
I was just going to follow up what I said just now with something along those lines. And a lot of it has to do with the business side of things.
Absolutely.
Right? I think also, too, with students, especially younger ones, we're in a day and age now where there's so many distractions that didn't exist when I went through high school, and I'm sure when you didn't do either, or when you weren't there when you went through as well.
Yeah.
And that's a problem as well. There's a lot of people that want instant gratification. And if you really want to study the art of music, it's not an instant gratification thing. You need to put time in, you need to get in the right headspace, and you need to fall in love with this. And it needs to be a priority. And you need to look at yourself and see how much of a priority you're going to make. If you really want to be true to this, you have to give everything to it.
Sure.
You have to, you just do.
Sure, and that's a part of growing up.
Absolutely.
Anyway, is embracing
Yes.
being able to embrace delayed gratification.
Yes.
Right? When you're a child, you want it
Yes.
now, and everybody gives it to you now.
Now that I'm
when
50,
you grow up,
yeah, now that I'm 50
Yeah.
or 52, I want to reap what I've sown. Because
Right.
for like my years in university, a lot of my buddies or colleagues, whatever, were going across to Denny's Den and having pints and shit like that, and going out on dates and all that stuff. I was a hermit in the practice room. I was willing to sacrifice about 8 or 10 years of just from 20 to 30 of just, I didn't have a life. I had no girlfriends. It was, well, my girlfriend was the Charlie Parker Omnibook, and we got along, well, bad at first, but after a while we came to an understanding.
Right. Yeah.
But that was it for me. Like I was nose to the grindstone, because then I thought when I'm 30, then I'll ease off a little bit, or whatever. I'm gonna, and that's why, like I said, I spent 4 years in my 20s. I went on my first big band tour when I was 23, and that was with Vic Damone, the crooner.
Really?
Vic Damone, and he was married to Diahann Carroll at the time. And then after that, I was on with the Jimmy Dorsey band for 3 months across the U.S. And then the third one I did was with the last surviving Mills brother and his son, who I still maintain contact with. And the last one was 6 weeks with Maureen McGovern and Mel Torme.
Oh, really?
And there was one more in there that I was offered, but I didn't do, which was another, I think it was 4 weeks, 3.5, 4 weeks with Pat Boone and Florence Anderson.
No shit.
Mrs. Brady.
Yeah,
I
right.
would have gone out with Mrs. Brady, but
Yeah.
I ended up refusing that one.
Oh.
But I met a lot of guys, really good LA players,
Oh, yeah.
and all the bands were all based around the LA area. So, I met a lot of guys from the LA area. Like even with one Mel Torme, I still maintain contact with Don Osborne, his drummer.
Do you really?
Who used to study with Buddy Rich,
Really?
because his dad used to work for Slingerland, and he set up lessons with Buddy Rich.
Wow.
He lives just south of Portland, Oregon, and he's poked me on Facebook 251 times
Really?
in a row. So he and I have a little thing going there, we're poking each other. I mean, we've sent a couple of messages.
He
here.
was certainly in good hands with who he was studying.
Absolutely.
That's for damn
Absolutely.
sure.
And-
So sorry, but just back to so musical apocalypse in a sentence then would be
Well, let's look at the business side of things, especially with what's happening to musicians now, with the whole iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, those nano payments that come in. I remember reading a thing, it was a quote by Peter Frampton saying that I've had, well, what the hell was it? It was like 8 or 9 million or 13 million downloads of Baby I Love Your Way. And he's made like $3,000 off of it.
right.
Like 13 million downloads.
Right. And it's legal.
It's legal.
Right. And mind you, I want to say, because I heard this through the grapevine, and I'm not, I'm not being a trumpet here. I'm certainly no huge fan of the individual, but I guess Trump is looking at legislation, at least in the States, to take on to task Spotify and these
Well, then that might be the first good thing he's done since he's been there.
right.
And I mean that, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as a musician, I think we can agree to that. So, so I got the definition of that. I got the definition. What do you think? And this is the $60,000 question, or I suppose now the $1 billion question. But what can you do about it? What can be done about
Well,
this apocalypse?
we can
this
only-
apocalyptic.
Well, we have to stay creative. We can't let it, when you think of that stuff, you can get extremely frustrated. I think we have to be careful in no knee-jerk reactions. We have to, and I can't believe I'm even saying this, but if Trump is going to do that, we have to support that. We do, because if we're still going to give ourselves creatively, it's nice to get stuff back.
You have to be compensated.
Absolutely.
I think that, like you
It
said,
has to be that way.
you alluded to, almost giving up a few times, and I almost have given up a few times, and that was really the motivation. The fact that, what the fuck am I doing?
And it
I'm
keeps
making nothing.
calling me back, so I can't.
Well, that's
And it's like the last second time was like, I want to quit.
Right.
I don't, and it was like I can't.
a guy cursed me once. I went to work at Telus downtown, making, well, back in the day, 18, 20 an hour to start, which was good.
That's pretty good.
And so I met this musician. I can't remember who it was. I seriously can't. But you know, I think I'd known him or something, and we just bumped into each other, and he's like, what are you doing? And I said, you know, man, I mean, I just can't do this music thing, you know, like it's just fucking drained me. And so I'm working at TELUS now. And he looked at me and he said, you'll be back. And I was like, oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't curse me like that. And he said, no. He said, that is who you are. And I did. And I did. I left TELUS. I actually called my boss on the cell phone in a car on the way to the airport to fly to London, England, to catch a ship. And you know, and I told her, I said, I'm not coming into work today, and I'm probably not coming in tomorrow. And she said, you know, if it was anybody else, I'd be really pissed off. But you have to, and you go. And it was, you know, just a great moment with this lady that knew what it was all about. She did get it.
She got it.
She did get it.
And that's where I go back to when I said, I think it chose me. So because of that, I have the hardest time ever saying no to it. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm not a father. I'm sure I'll never be one at this point. But I know. Oh, sorry, that's my phone.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I know enough guys who have kids that when they say, like, their kid says something to them, it's like, I can't say no to that. They just fall to mush. I'm like that with this. I fall to. I cannot see my life without it. I just can't.
Right.
And it's like oxygen to me. I have to have it to exist. And if I don't, I die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't physically die, but my soul is just
No.
just done.
I'm just sort of reminded of this new Ricky Gervais series that I watched a little bit of, and it's not his best series, but his wife dies, and he's just thoroughly depressed. He doesn't care about anything. He just wants to die, to be with her. And the guy said, well, why don't you? What's the only thing? And he said, I looked down at my dog and I just realized that, you know, what the fuck are you gonna do? Like, you know, if I die, so do you.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the thing. And so I think music in the same way, you know, is the thing that I just can't give up on. You know what I mean? It won't let me, and it keeps petitioning me in the sweetest and most sincerest of ways.
It comes up to me and puts its arm around me and gives me a nice kiss
I know,
on the
and you
cheek.
just want to go, hey, fuck off.
Yeah, and I turn
to
it and I go, oh God, it's so good to see you.
Yeah.
So good to be around you.
Right. For me, sometimes I feel the pressure of that, and I go, you know, why? And it doesn't give me the answer because I already know the answer, and that is because that's the way it is.
When I need to unwind, headphones go in my ear,
Yeah.
and I go to my place.
Yeah.
And my wife knows that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. My cats don't, because they're all over me most of the time, but they'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
But when I need to decompress, that's what I do. I put my headphones on and I put my head back, close my eyes, and that is my happy place.
Sure.
It really is.
Sure. But it has been an absolute treat because you and I have never sat down like this before.
We have not.
No, I've appreciated you every moment that we work together, and I really.
And we're going into the studio soon.
And we're going to the studio soon, and I can't wait because that to me is sort of, you know, and I know you might, you know, don't balk at this because this is like a bucket list moment for me.
Really?
Yeah, to get to work with you on that level, I'm very appreciative. So
The bottom line is we have fun first, because if we don't, let's not do it.
you know what?
That's
That's okay.
us.
That's okay. I can shuffle, and
I'm looking forward to hearing it.
and yeah, the rest, you know, as they say, is history. I want to thank you,
Sure.
and I want to thank you guys,
Absolutely.
and
My pleasure.
yeah, and tune in next week for another episode of Unsung.